Will, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Hey, Aaron. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, so Mississippi State has already begun its spring practice. Alabama gets started on Tuesday. Anything of note worth mentioning that you've noticed so far?
Well, this spring is a lot different than last year, of course. This being my first year on the MSUB, but the difference is, this year they actually know who the quarterback is, so that kind of helps things. Where last year they really didn't know who was going to replace Dak Prescott. Obviously, Nick Fitzgerald became that guy, so they come into this spring, or they came into this spring, I should say, with that kind of security and that, hey, we know that we have this. But there's so many other question marks regarding this team. Pretty much everywhere you look, their leading wide receiver Fred Ross is gone. Their defense struggled last year. So the most interesting thing I think though is the fact that this is another new defensive coordinator in Todd Grantham here in Starkville, and he is again charged with the job of trying to fix what's broken.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, Fitzgerald seemed to have just kind of surprised everyone a little bit last year, and then I guess when he proved it wasn't a fluke, people believed in him. What are the expectations for him this year? I mean, Dan Mullen certainly has a great reputation in working with quarterbacks, and the way this guy developed throughout last year, there seems to be a pretty good expectation going for him into this year.
Yeah, Dan Mullen always says a quarterback makes the biggest progression between year one as a starter and year two as a starter, and that's where Nick is right now. So that's going to be interesting to see how much he improves. The expectation is for him to be a much better, quote, quarterback, unquote, and not, relying so much on his legs. Obviously, he will still do that, but the idea this year is to get more production out of him just as a standpoint of throwing the ball as a quarterback, and that's what everybody's going to be looking for here in Starkville with Nick.
I know you weren't on the beat last year, but I know you studied, you got up to speed on the way last year shaped out. It was a really slow start for Mississippi State last year, and then they really started playing better. They didn't have the record they wanted, but certainly when you go to Oxford, Mississippi, and put a 35-point beating on your biggest rival, that will turn some things around. And then getting into the bowl game and winning that. How much do you think the way the season ended helped this team in terms of going into this year?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, right? Like, you kind of have like these positive vibes because, hey, they beat Ole Miss, they blew them out, and then they win their bowl game too. It wasn't the prettiest of games, but it goes down as a win, and they deserve. I mean, they deserve those two wins. You can't take them away. And so that kind of, it doesn't make you forget that, hey, this team really didn't do so hot early on. Of course, the loss to South Alabama, a couple of other bad losses as well. That's the one that sticks out of my mind because it was the opener. But, I mean, yeah, there is that sort of positive vibe, though, around the team just because of the way they ended the season. And you kind of get the feeling that, hey, maybe they figured some things out. The problem, though, is that it's another defensive coordinator for this team. And I think that that's going to take a little bit of time, even though, obviously Grantham enters with quite a pedigree.
Yeah, I mean, Todd Grantham's got a good reputation as a defensive coordinator. Is there a lot of excitement for that hire around Starkville?
It's kind of like we've seen this before type of deal as far as the fans go, because, hey, this is nothing new for Starkville and Mississippi State getting another new defensive coordinator. So I think from the MSU fan base, it's kind of like that sort of, yeah, we should feel good about this, but let's see if this is what it's supposed to be first, before we emotionally invest ourselves and completely believe that this is going to be okay. But if you look at Grantham's history, everything suggests that what he wants to put in place is completely plausible, and that's an aggressive defense that's going to cause turnovers, that's going to pressure the quarterback, it's going to attack, it's going to be in the backfield creating havoc. All of that seems completely plausible when you look at his track record, because that's what he's been able to create along each one of his stops. So with Mississippi State's defense too, they have some guys. I mean, they have Leo Lewis, Jeffrey Simmons. I mean, they have the guys who should be able to do that. So I'm looking for it to work out. My own personal opinion, I think it should work out just fine. I think that this defense will be improved. And I think it's a really good fit from that standpoint.
You mentioned the loss of Fred Ross from that offense. How are they built from a wide receiver position? Do they have? I mean, obviously, guys like Fred Ross don't come along very often, but how are they situated at wide receiver?
Yeah, the thing is that I asked Nick Fitzgerald recently, honestly, how much not confidence, but how hard is it to say to yourself, well, who's our big time vertical threat this year? Because we know who it was last year, and he's not here anymore. So, but he gave an interesting answer, and he's like, well, I feel really good about our receiving corps because everybody's back except for one guy. Granted, it is the guy, it is their best guy, but he has some truth in that statement because they return a bunch of guys who are capable. They just have to do it this year. They have to break out. I'm looking at guys like a Jamal Couch, a guy from Phoenix City, Alabama, who was once committed to Florida State as a linebacker, actually. But he's a big kid, and he should have a pretty good season for MSU. Another guy who, if I remember correctly, he may be an Alabama guy too, and Reggie Todd, another guy who's really athletic. But these guys are guys who they have the body, they have the athleticism. They haven't done it yet, though. So that's really the thing for Mississippi State's receivers is they have a group of guys who have yet to really put that all together. And that's really what's going to be the wild card for them offensively this year.
Talking to Will Sammon, he covers Mississippi State for the Clarion Ledger over in Mississippi. One of the things I like about Dan Mullen that sometimes I think people around the South may not appreciate is he kind of says what he thinks, and feelings be darned. He's just going to say what he thinks. What is his outlook? Is he poor mouthing this team? Is he really upbeat? What has he had to say so far about this year's Bulldogs?
Yeah, I'm with you, Aaron. I mean, he says what's on his mind, and it's kind of like what you see is what you get, which I really respect and I like. I mean, it's like he's going to say what's on his mind. That's for sure with Dan Mullen, and you appreciate that as a journalist point of view. That aside, though, I think he's sort of like modestly high on the team. I think he's aware of what the capabilities are. He is really excited to see what he can get out of Nick Fitzgerald in year two. There's a lot of confidence in Todd Grantham as a defensive coordinator to kind of obviously improve what happened last year. And, I think a lot of their problems also, speaking from the defense, were in the secondary. Their secondary was not good at all. And I think a lot of those guys are going to be better from the season that they had last year just because it became a thing where they were just plugging guys in who never even played those positions before, or just it's been a while since they were counted on as starters as like a corner. I mean, there was a lot of mixing and matching last year that they're looking to avoid, and their depth has improved, their experience has improved. They were, it became sort of like a repeated mantra last year of Dan Mullen always saying, we're a young team. They were, though, and this year they can't rely on that line. That line is not something that they can use really. So I think there's definitely higher expectations than last year because I think this team can be pretty good. I think this team, just to kind of throw out a number, I was looking at their schedule before you called again, and I was just saying to myself, 8 wins is definitely a life-based scenario. I think at least. And then they can get more than that if, they have some upsets. They have a tough 3-week stretch that involves Alabama. If they can pull up a couple of wins where, not many are expecting them to get that W, then you're looking at higher than that. But I think 8 wins is something that's, not too far-fetched for this group. Wrapping
up here with Will Sammon, the Mississippi State beat writer for the Clarion Ledger. You can follow him on Twitter at Will Sammon, Sammon. You kind of hit where I was going to go next. What's a good season for Mississippi State this year? Because I'm looking at the schedule and the way they open the conference slate to get LSU at Georgia, at Auburn, and then you come back home in a couple weeks and take you got a BYU team at an out-of-conference game, and then you close the season with Alabama, Arkansas, Ole Miss. And we'll see what Arkansas is. Ole Miss isn't projected to do that well this year, but what would be in the fans' eye a good year for this year?
Well, for starters, you can't lose those non-conference games because that's they lost those games last year, and that was just unacceptable. From a fan's perspective, from talking to fans, that's obviously they all want to win. I mean, that is the fan for you, but to be an SEC team and to lose to like South Alabama, for example, shouldn't happen. So they can't have that, obviously. And then if you avoid that, that gives you some wins that you didn't have even last year when you finished the year counting the bowl season 6-7. So you add those up, and like I said before, if you can squeak a couple of those wins that, hey, maybe like you're not supposed to win, or those are harder wins to come by, the SEC teams that you mentioned, I think if win one or two of those, that boosts their win total. And they absolutely have to beat Ole Miss again this year, considering, like you said, Aaron, that Ole Miss, especially with not being able to play in a bowl, they're not what they were at this time last year. Let's say, they don't have that aura around them that, hey, this is one of the SEC's best teams. They're not that team now, so you have to blow them out again. And I think if you avoid those non-conference losses from last year, if you beat Ole Miss handedly, and if you win one or two of those games that you mentioned, the LSU game, the Auburn game, if you find a way to win one or two of those games, that's a pretty good season, I think, from this group.